like everyone else, it's afternoon, but it's 7:15 for me. Can we see the screen? I'm sharing. Can we see that?
Yes, we can.
Okay,
Yeah.
wonderful. Okay, thank you. So this morning, today, what I'm going to do is I am going to share a study that I've been conducting for about the past year. So just for a little bit of positionality and sharing my own background, I was a high school biology, chemistry, and physics teacher for about 10 years. And then I went in for the next 16 years of my career. I was an instructional coach and a principal at 3 different schools. And I finished my career as a superintendent over different communities with multiple schools that I was supervising principals. And so part of my background has been STEM education and STEAM education. And STEAM education really is my love of the two. And so an area that I'm going to present that I've been looking at research and studies and practices from early childhood through higher education is how interweaving music within STEM programs or vice versa inside music programs, interweaving the relationship of music to STEM can help support a more robust type of educational setting from early childhood through higher education. And so for this presentation, what I am going to do is just look at how music is related to science and cognitive science. And so interestingly enough, there is a relation that would say outside the acronym of STEM and STEAM, a lot of relationship to neurophysiology, psychoacoustics, cultural psychology. In other words, the way that mechanically we have sound waves, which are non-living things, the mechanics of physics entering the ear, the anatomy of that, the physiology, and there's a large psychological piece where we interpret for one person's love of a type of music is another person's dislike. And so understanding those threads between the two and how they're related, and really how the inclusion of art and STEM creates STEAM, which there is an important emotional connection that occurs through learning, which is one of the reasons why, as you know, almost 30 years of being a K-12 educator before going on to higher ed, is that type of critical thinking and creativity comes from the inclusion of the arts within STEM. And so there's an emotional response that happens. And from STEM to STEAM, STEM employs transdisciplinary and interdisciplinary thinking. And that's very important for 21st century skills that we want our students to be able to experience a dilemma and know how to problem solve. And so threading those actions between and within STEM creates design thinking for students. And when we include the arts, as I said, there's a development of a creative type of transdisciplinary and interdisciplinary teaching that occurs. And so the other thing that I've done over the last probably 9 years with my teachers when I was a principal and superintendent is I would have them look at the 5 C's of STEAM learning. This is something that I devised with my teachers, and I would work with them, look at how we construct, and that's through constructivism and that experiential type of learning. And then there's collaboration and communication. Those are interrelated. So when students work together, maybe they communicate and collaborate, or vice versa, collaborate, communicate. And the last component is critically thinking for creative thinking. And so the creative thinking is the piece that you end up with the innovation. And with the innovation, there's normally some inclusion of the arts. And in this case, looking at how music is related to this. So as I mentioned, there's a translation of environmental physics into anatomical physiological sensations. The brain is going to combine these sensations, either psychological cognitive sciences, the subjective experience, the neurophysiology, how we process stimuli and within those neurons in the brain. Psychoacoustics is the psychology of sound. And then the cultural psychology, very, very interesting types of research here that I've been doing in looking at those things that we are naturally born with. Beginning at 2 months old, children start to respond to music either in pitch or in rhythm. And by 5 months old, they actually can tell key changes. If someone says the same type of rhythm or a song, but a different key, they still follow it. So beginning at an early age, it's an innate type of learning that occurs. And so when we're looking at things like frequency, wavelengths, harmonics, timbre, amplitude, these are non-living things are in the air, but from those we get chords, notes, and scales, and then there are responses that drive an emotional type of memory in the brain of harmony and melodies. There's quite a bit of physics, and I, as a former physics teacher, these are the things I would work with, and wavelengths, and the relationship between frequency and wavelength gives us our different pitches. Going through, those types of computations, obviously, early childhood, elementary school, you would not be doing that type of work, but in late middle school, high school, higher ed, of course, there's a lot of physics you can do of sound, harmonics, amplitude, timbre, and musical notes. So this is kind of interesting when we look at the mathematics and the physics and the science and the technology and engineering that is related to harmonics. Those are other types of frequencies that occur, and they multiply those frequencies in hertz, and they're interpreted, but psychologically something's happening in the brain where you connect to it. Amplitude is that level of sound that you're hearing. And so there's some complex mathematics that you can do within physics, again, mostly secondary level of school, and certainly university settings for higher education with sine cosine functions. Timbre is one of the more interesting things here with psychoacoustics. A lot of psychology where you can, in very young children, again, after 5, 6 months old, and certainly in kindergarten, there are things that children recognize, and they can tell a difference between a guitar and a mandolin. And so you can hear a song and you don't see the instrument, but you can tell what it is. So there's something that you process there, and those are those musical notes. So quite a bit of music theory that is related to math and science in terms of the intervals between notes, semitones, scales, equal temperament. Equal temperament is one of the areas that gets very interesting when we look at how hundreds of years ago, it's called Western scale of 12 major notes, and I don't mean major or minor notes with that if you know much about music, but 12 notes in music, and they're equally measured ratios between the notes. And that's where we end up having notes that sound out of key. Because if we look at the screen where I have the tonic, that's our root note. Like if we have a song and it's in the key of A, there's a ratio that's happening. The sound wave is 1-to-1, but there are certain notes when someone hits it, it sounds, ooh, that sounds bad. And it actually sometimes can make you kind of jump because it sounds terrible. If we look at these weird frequency ratios, 16 15ths, another one, probably the worst sounding type of note is called the augmented fourth. And if we look at the frequency there, that frequency is actually pretty bad, 45, 30 seconds. But when we get these leveled frequencies of, 4/3 to the first root note, or 3 seconds, these other frequencies are very pleasing. And the reason they sound pleasing for everyone is because the smaller ratio between those frequencies, the less dissonant they are going to sound. So the music sounds pleasing. Mathematically, because there are 12 notes, we're dealing with the root of 12. And so in secondary school, obviously university, you can go through the complicated physics of these and mathematics of these formulations, but these give us the 12 notes. And this is hundreds of years old. So the mathematics was being performed hundreds of years old, years ago, before it could be done quickly with computing. This, if we look at the black colored wave at the top, that would be our root note. When notes sound pleasing, they will actually line up. And so in each one of these areas here, I put like a little dot. This is where those waves sound pleasing to the ear for anyone. And that's what makes a note sound like it's in key. And so eventually they line up. But when we have those weird notes that have, the 45, 30-second type of ratios or overlaps, they sound very bad. So again, I'm repeating some of this with harmony, melody, rhythm. In young learners, infant age children, at the bottom I put in sort of that aquamarine color. wonderful studies out there, 2 months old, 5, 6 months old. They can recall melodies even when altered in pitch. And so you know that if anyone's ever been around babies, they hear music and they start kicking their feet. And so that's just an inherent, innate quality of humans, and other animals too, that they make music. But music learning in context of STEM for STEAM can have a positive role in children's development. It fosters social emotional learning, which is very important because it connects learners to the learning. And so interweaving it within your science, tech, engineering, mathematics courses can also, if it's modern music that young people listen to, it can relate to their learning. Couple of, and for the sake of our study, the study I'm doing now, it's been again for a year and I just completed it, but in early childhood, the major takeaways for our context in a 15-minute presentation, the social emotional development, it actually embedding music within those early childhood settings helps with language literacy skills later on in kindergarten. So it's actually been shown to help students read because you can do things with reading with measured time and pitch, and it helps you remember. And it's clear when students begin that in early childhood through kindergarten, by the time they get the primary education, they're able to then do some interesting things where you can do more STEM and STEAM, building instruments, understanding there are 12 notes, how do they sound different, show them what the wavelengths look like if the mathematics is too advanced. They can understand then why things sound good and sometimes they sound bad, but then there's a psychology behind it as well. So in secondary and higher education, that's where you can get more into the technological, mathematical, physics-based activities, pitch, musical notes. A very important piece that for all of us here would be in our higher education. It's the last sentence. In higher education, teacher training is a big deal. And as a former person who was a principal, one of the schools I was principal at, I had was 4,500 kids in one school. It was a very, very big high school. And so working with my teachers in our teacher preparation is saying that, in servicing them on these things can create curriculum that's creative. It helps resonate with the students, and especially in higher education, involving these types of data with our teachers in training can help with their skills development. So music and STEM is for holistic types of education and learning, provides students opportunities to connect emotionally. So there's that emotive type of connection for interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary learning. There's an inherent ability that we're born with. We're for music, so there's an emotional connection. So connected in again through music within STEM is very important. And those types of things do resonate within students cognitively. So the emotional piece is related to the cognitive growth of students. And last thing is I created a website that I use with my students. And if you want to scan either with your phone or take a screenshot of this and do it later, you can feel free to contact me. There's my email, cdignam at Governor State University, by Chicago. And I can, and the testimonials, if you want me to promote your work that you're doing as a researcher, I'm happy to do that. And I use this with my students as well for sharing the work that we're doing in educational research. So thank you for taking time to listen to my presentation. And I hope that that was helpful and enlightening. Does anyone have any questions?